I left school at 16 and went to do what was then called a YTS, or a youth training scheme. And I went to fix a thing called a typewriter. That's what I started off doing at 16. I really, really struggled with learning that conventional way.
But am I right in thinking you are dyslexic?
Once I found out I was dyslexic, that it's a superpower because I've got a really good memory. I can kind of remember things. I remember numbers pretty well. I remember conversations pretty well, which helps you when you're growing a business. Very quickly realised that it was the salespeople that were making all the money. They had the nice cars, the nice suits, nice girlfriends. You're not a failure. Just because you're not good at school, it doesn't mean you're a failure. It really doesn't.
Welcome to Billionaire Business. My name is Ian Fishwick. I'm a serial entrepreneur in the UK IT and telecoms industry. I've done over 40 mergers and acquisitions, but that's absolutely nothing compared to the guy that you're about to meet.
And that's not me.
No, not you.
I'm Chris Godsmark, and for the last 25 years, probably, I've been advising on M&A deals, floats, fundraisings for companies, some of them with a valuation of £1 billion or more.
By the age of 25, approximately half of the UK population has been involved in some kind of higher education, normally university. And often, quite rightly, we have a lot of discussions about graduates and how difficult it is to get a job. But enough about them. What about the other 50%, the 50% that doesn't go to university? What we're going to try and show you in this special episode, because we're going to dedicate this to the people who don't go to university, is that you don't need some massive academic background to build a great business. The man we're about to meet didn't go to uni, and he didn't build a £1 billion business, he built two. And then he's got a third one, which is only worth £500 million, so we're not going to count that today, right? This is a man that Chris and I have known for many years. At a recent conference, he was described as probably the UK's greatest deal maker ever in the UK telecoms industry. It's an enormous pleasure to welcome Matthew Riley, founder of Daisy Group.
Thank you very much, Ian. Welcome. Hi, Chris.
Hi, man. Good to see you. Before we go into how it all came about, just give us a snapshot of where the business, or where your various different business interests are today.
Yeah. So I'm exec chair of two businesses. One is GIACOM, which is a digital wholesale provider in the UK of telecom and IT services products, probably the leading one, I guess. And then the second business, which is the more recent deal that we've just completed, which is O2 Daisy. And again, I'm exec chair of that business.
And people will know, obviously, Virgin Media, household name, O2. Yes. You've pulled out their business-to-business customers, effectively, lots of different customers with mobiles or broadband, and you've merged them with your small business, right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So we basically carved out of the mothership, as I call it, VMO2, the SMB and LEPs, which is large enterprise customers, away out of the mothership, which was a consumer business, put them into a separate vehicle and merged it with my business, which was Daisy.
That's kind of the sort of, is that the pinnacle of your career? Because we want to take you back a little bit. As Ian said, a lot of entrepreneurs, actually, you didn't sort of do A-levels and university and go into corporate life.
Yeah.
I think you started really right from day one selling, didn't you, Matt?
Yes. Yeah. Well, I actually started life, believe it or not. I left school at 16 and went to do what was then called a YTS, or a youth training scheme. I guess nowadays you'd call it an apprenticeship. And I went to fix a thing called a typewriter. That's what I started off doing at 16, going into typing pools, fixing typewriters. But then I very quickly started to do fax machines, thermal paper, you'll remember, both of you. And then all of a sudden they had this new thing that was amazing. It was on plain paper, inkjet fax machines. So I used to go and repair those, and very quickly realised that it was the salespeople that were making all the money. They had the nice cars, the nice suits, nice girlfriends. They seemed to have all the money and all the trappings, and the engineers didn't quite get that.
But how do you get from being an engineer to being one of those flashy sales guys?
Yeah. Well, not flashy sales guy here, and I was never flashy. I'm from Burnley. I tried not to be flashy. I mean, from my perspective, it was the best thing that could have ever happened to me because I really struggled to learn at school. The way schools are set up wasn't particularly right for me. I wasn't a naughty child or anything like that. I was bit class clown, but I really struggled to sort of learn in the way that they taught. So I only got 5 GCSEs, and one of those was woodwork, which again, most people go, what's that? But that's what we used to do, woodwork, metalwork, things with your hands, being creative, etc. I really, really struggled with sort of learning that conventional way. And then I went into work.
And sorry to interrupt you, Matt, but am I right in thinking you are dyslexic?
Yeah, I didn't know that at the time.
Which is obviously a common trait for entrepreneurs. You sort of, I suppose you sort of think differently, don't you?
Yeah. I think, and I know other people say it now, but I've always thought, once I found out I was dyslexic, that it's a superpower because I've got a really good memory. I can kind of remember things. I remember numbers pretty well. I remember conversations pretty well, which helps you when you're growing a business and you're running at 100 mile an hour. But back then, I found it was quite difficult.
There's actually quite a lot of famous businessmen who are dyslexic, aren't there?
Yeah. But I didn't know what it was, Ian. It's only fairly recently that I actually got tested and found out that that's what I was. So I struggled at school a little bit in terms of some of the things that you have to do.
So when you first started selling, was that knocking on doors or what kind of selling?
So I was doing this youth apprentice scheme, so a youth training scheme, and I wasn't allowed to go into sales. I got taken on. The way it worked was you were put into a company. The government paid towards your salary, which was £27.50, by the way. I always remind my children of that. The year after, it went up...
Not an hour.
No. And I think second year, you got £29.50, and they actually give me an extra £5 in the second year. They're very good of them. They weren't having to pay much, so they put a £5 a week towards it. I got taken on at the end of the 2 years, because you didn't have to get taken on. They could have then got rid of you if you weren't, behaving appropriately or doing the right things that you needed to do. But I'd already realised that I wanted to be in sales. They wouldn't give me a job straight away because they said, you're too young. And believe it or not, I had a baby face in those days.
Because you're 17 then?
Yeah. So I eventually, and I'm you know me well enough to know I don't really take no for an answer. So I befriended the entire sales department. I used to give them leads from when I used to go out and repair a fax and say, this one's on its last legs. You need to ring so-and-so. So I became very friendly with them all and kept saying to them, I want to get into sales. And they were like, yeah, but you're still too young. And then they eventually gave up and said, right, here you go. You can do telesales. Gave me a Yellow Pages, which again, most people have heard of these days.
Telesales,
horrendous.
Cold calling.
Calling. Here, start on A and start ringing up, and you need to book appointments for this guy for photocopiers. So you'd ring up and say, have you got a photocopier? Can I send someone in? And just literally the hardest job in the world. But again, I loved it. Then what I convinced the guys who I made appointments for was that it'd actually be easier for me to understand how to book appointments if I came on an appointment with you. I said, let me come in with you and understand what the customer really wants and how it all works. It'll make my job so much easier. I mean, to be honest, it was just a way of getting off the phones.
Yeah.
We got the deal on one of the deals, and then he took me out for lunch, one of the sales guys, and that was it then. I felt as though I was in their camp, as it were, because I was adding value to them and they were making money. And I very quickly progressed to then getting my own patch. I started selling stationery, believe it or not. And then telephone systems started to come about. So it's 1992, 93 now, where there was other competing products other than just BT. So it's Panasonic A-series.
So you're still not running a business? You're working for other people?
Yeah. I'm now 18 and a half, 19. And I'm selling Panasonic Air systems.
By the way. I'm 65 and a quarter.
Yeah. So out we go. We start selling, Panasonic A-series. Then another product, Index, came along, the SDX telephone system. I was one of the first sales guys there to go on the training courses and, start doing it. And I'm then 20 years old and then 21. And I'm feeling pretty good about life. My life's going really well. I've got a really nice company car. I've got my own house. I've got a mortgage. Things are going well. And I think I told you about this before, and we discussed it a number of times. I got a phone call from someone called a headhunter, which again, everyone will laugh about now, but then I'd never even heard of it. I'm like, well, what does that mean? He said, you've been recommended to us for a job for a company called DTW, Deutsche Bergen Telekom.
First time that happens in your life, you don't feel good about it, do you?
I felt really good, but I thought it was a setup. I was like, just checking it wasn't one of my mates taking the mickey. So I ended up going for a meeting with this guy, all off the back of, what the offer was, because I think they were going to offer me 3 times my basic salary. And for a lad from Burnley, that was like, I'm going to the meeting. I got the job and started working for them, and then worked my way straight away. I got a regional sales manager job, and then very quickly realised the opportunities in running your own business. I always say working for that family company who had the office equipment company was the best grounding I could have ever had, because they knew where every pound, shilling and pence was in that business. They really looked after the pound.
Isn't it? That's a big lesson, because if you just started at a giant national company, you probably would have never have learned that, would you?
Absolutely. And I actually got in trouble when I went to work for the big corporate by all the other sales guys going, "You're embarrassing us because you're not putting enough expenses in." But I treat it like my money, so I wasn't taking people whining and dining them because it wasn't my money. And I couldn't have done it in my last job.
Yeah.
Whereas these guys were in London, they're going, "Matt, we're spending £1,000 a month and claiming it back. You're doing like £50 a month. It's embarrassing." But that's the difference, isn't it, in the mentality. And then we went from there. We saw an opportunity to set our own business up.
And I was going to say, so I mean, that's one of the big sort of transformational things in your life, isn't it? You set your own business up.
Yeah.
And no one can underestimate. We've all run our own businesses at one stage in our careers. I mean, it's a massive change.
Yeah.
How did you? Did that just sort of come about, and you just thought, look, I really, really want to be my own boss?
Yeah.
Or was it the market opportunity, or what? And how did that play out? Because you make your mistakes.
Yes.
Once you set your business up as you go along.
Of course you do. Yeah. I think I was always that kid that wanted more. I was always that sort of child. I was always looking at the big house on my paper round or my milk round, because I worked really, really hard. So I'd always have milk rounds, paper rounds, et cetera, et cetera. I was always buying and selling things, whether that's tuck shop stuff, or one of the best scams that we ever had was we used to go out finding horseshoes, and then my friend worked at a dipper. We called it a dipper, aluminium dipper. So they used to silver plate these things. So he worked there, did them for nothing, and then we'd sell them on a Sunday at a car boot sale. So my dad had dropped me off at a car boot sale with a pace table, and I'd sell them for £5 a pop. I made more money as a YTS doing my Sunday things. Yeah. I made like 3 times that.
So hang on, you've done so many different business ideas in your life. Was that the wackiest one you've done?
Yeah, that's probably the wackiest one I've ever done.
Just checking.
Yeah. But it was a great one. People used to sell them, and we put ribbons on them, and things like that. But I think I've always been really interested in business.
What was your first one then?
Recruitment. Once I met this guy who did recruitment, and he told me how much his fee was on me going there, I thought I should have a business like this. And I met somebody whose girlfriend was in recruitment, and she was saying to me, she was moaning about her employer. And I said, "Well, why don't you just start up your own business? I don't understand it." She went, "Well, I don't have any money." I said, "Well, I've got some money. I'll put some money in." And that was my first business, Daisy Executive Search and Selection. It's the first business I set up.
How long did you do that for?
I was 23. I set it up, but I did it for 3 years. What I realised very quickly is she could do to me what she did to other employee very, very quickly. Because all of a sudden, once it got operational and we got 8 people and it was making money, they didn't need my money. So I very quickly realised I needed to sell it to her. So I got myself out of it. And that's when I was still employed. So that was my first business. And I knew nothing about it. I had to actually go into a bank and say, "How do you set up a business bank account?" Because I don't know how to do it.
Yeah, I've been through that one.
Yeah. And I remember the guy, Wayne Ellison at Barclays, the best man on the planet. He helped me set up my first 3 businesses. And he was nothing was too difficult for him. I couldn't ask a noddy question enough. It was brilliant.
What was numbers 2 and 3 there?
So then I did a cabling business, because can you remember everyone used to have the T cables in the back of the laptops? They didn't have laptops then, did they? They were desktops. And then we moved to Cat 5. So there's a massive opportunity to be able to upgrade businesses. So I set that up with a load of electricians.
So this was cabling offices?
Cabled offices. Yeah. Sold that to the guys who ran it. So I did that. And then the third one was Daisy, which was the telecommunication business. And the reason I set that up was every time we went to sell telephone systems, which is what I did for DTW, the biggest hardship was trying to get the connectivity in on time. And I thought there's got to be a different way to do it.
But I mean, you've been selling boxes, let's say, and now you're going to start selling telecoms. Right? So it's a different skill set, it's different knowledge. How did you know what to do?
I didn't really. I just thought there's got to be a way to do it. And I read an article that BT were being forced into opening up BT Wholesale. So to do the line rentals because before that you couldn't do it. You could only do calls. You couldn't do the actual line rental. And we applied straight away for a license. And once I knew I got that license, I thought, right, I'm going to learn really quickly. The biggest challenge of setting Daisy up was trying to get direct debit origination, because for a bank to take you on, they almost have to sponsor the fact. So I had to show them the credibilities. Thankfully, because of the other two businesses, and Wayne at Barclays, he helped me do that.
Let's just explore that for because I've been through that. I mean, the nirvana for all of us is a business with subscription revenue that comes in every month.
Yep.
But you have to have the bank processing capability to either get standing orders or direct debits in.
Yes.
Right. And for a long time, the banks weren't that slick at setting new people up, were they?
No, really, really difficult. It took us quite a while to put the plan together. And then, again, going back to this guy who really helped us get that through, we got that because what I'd realised really quickly, and I guess this is where my mind works, I'd spotted the fact that with BT Wholesale, I got credit terms. So I got an amount of days, 30, 45, 60, whatever the days you get. And I was going to collect on direct debit in 7. So actually, I worked out really quickly how I could cash flow this business.
Let's just pause there for a second, because one of the stories I wrote in the book was about the market stall. How is it that people can turn up in a country and set up a market stall so quick? And it's because of the simplicity they've spotted that they can sell the goods to the customer before they have to pay the supplier.
Exactly that.
And that's fundamentally what you did.
Yep.
You got your money in 7 days, but you paid your supplier in 45.
Yes, exactly what I did.
And you can grow a business really quite rapidly doing that.
Yeah, and the faster you grow, the better it gets.
So you can grow a business really rapidly when the cash flow's coming in ahead of paying the suppliers, can't you?
Yes, absolutely, yeah. And the faster you grow, the better it is. And that's one of the reasons I set GIACOM up, which used to be called Daisy Wholesale Services. I realised in 2007, 2008, that actually if I set up a wholesale business that could sell to smaller telecoms resellers, I'd also get the benefit of that cash flow as well. And if you could improve the margins across your entire base, I'd very quickly realise that by putting wholesale growth on it, it'd help me get through the different price structures to get a better price for my direct business without having to do anything.
So,
can I just explain that bit? Right. We're going to try and take some of the telecoms lessons here and apply them to other industries.
Yep.
What you get with some very big suppliers is you get volume discounts. Fundamentally, the more you buy, the bigger the discounts. And that's essentially the game that Matt was playing, I think, was how do I drive the volumes up quick? Because suddenly, instead of getting 10% off, I'll now get 12% off, and then I get 15%. And therefore, you get the double whammy, not just the growth, but the profitability starts to climb.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. And the improved cash flow as well from that other business.
So you fast forward a few years, your turnover's now in the tens of millions.
Yes.
So the business is going really well.
Yep.
It's sales driven.
Yes.
But you said something which I think we all know because we all know each other well. I mean, you never sit still.
No.
Right? So that to a lot of entrepreneurs, a business turning over £50 million, making 5, 6, 7 million is fantastic.
Yep.
I'm done. I'll sell that business.
Yep.
But that's not you.
No.
Right, Matt? So the next stage is I think you win a couple of very important awards, which we'll talk about in a second.
Yes.
And you also do M&A.
Yes.
But was it the sort of recognition you were getting, the Entrepreneur of the Year award famously, was that what sort of said to you, hang on a minute, this is a sort of 500 million turnover business rather than a 50 million turnover business?
Yeah, absolutely. I remember we won the 2005 Sunday Times fastest growing tech company. And I think that was the piece where I actually thought to myself, wow, we've got a real opportunity here. Because all of a sudden we were speaking to different people in the banks. We were speaking to advisors, which we never spoke to before. We were getting recognition nationally. And I actually thought to myself, I've got a real opportunity here to do something quite special.
What we've both found over the years is the people who help you get from, say, 1 million to 10 million turnover may not necessarily be the ones who'll get you from 10 to 50 and 50 to 100, right? And that's quite difficult at times, isn't it? Because
Really
they're your mates as well. But you started to turbocharge the growth by buying other businesses.
Yes.
Right. Have you got obsessed with that now, do you think?
Have I got obsessed with it?
I
think I did at a stage.
You've done rather a few.
Yeah, I think I'd certainly say we did at a stage get obsessed with it because it became the drug. It became the thing that keeps the growth going. And it's the thing that we got reasonably good at as well. You know, we built a really good team of not just buying them, but also integrating them and having the team that then did that. I think it got to a stage, though, where we got so big, it was so hard to find deals that actually made a difference, that moved the needle, as people say, because the revenue is just so big. So, you know, if you're a 100 million revenue business and you buy a 1 million business, it's not making any difference. So we had to slow the number of deals down, but we just went for bigger deals.
Because you did, and we're going to fast forward a couple of bits of history, but the business ended up floated.
Yes, 2009.
And
that you helped
2009, which we did, and it was an unlikely, if I might say so, it was an unlikely period to float a business, because for people who perhaps don't remember the financial crisis, who are too young, the beginning of 2009, it looked like the world had literally fallen in.
Yes.
And there were almost no floats anywhere in the world.
Yeah.
And you come along middle of the year, you float Daisy. So suddenly you're on the stock market.
Yep.
And was there a point, and then fast forward again, you took the business private again a few years later. Was there a point where you sort of felt like you'd lost your personal control over the business? You know, there were non-executives and it wasn't, you know, you weren't enjoying the day-to-day, you know, excitement of the business in the way that, you know, become much more corporate?
I don't think so, because I don't think the culture really changed that much. I think we were a public company, but with a similar culture. And I think some of the non-execs sort of really understood that, and they understood that was probably our superpower. That was the bit that made us successful and good at what we did. And I always, when we were interviewing for non-execs, I'd always be really, really blatantly honest with them about me and my pitfalls. I know what I'm good at, and I also really, really know what I'm not so good at. And I was really clear with them what we wanted to do. I think for me, when we went public, it was the absolute right thing to do, and I'd do it again tomorrow. I had a really good experience of it, I've got to say.
Why did you do it?
Why did I do it? I needed to raise the cash because the banks wouldn't lend any money, and I had a list of 10 businesses I wanted to go and buy, and we bought 9 of those 10 by raising the money. So it was as simple as that. We raised a big pot of money to go and do the acquisitions, and then we executed over the next 2 years.
We've had this conversation before, because obviously I floated in the same industry a few years before you did. And part of the reason why I did in 2006 was, at that point, there was nowhere else to get money from.
Yes.
The concept of private equity, venture capital and all these other things just didn't exist at that point. But you then did something that I didn't do. So I stayed on the market for 17 years, right? And in hindsight, you got it right rather than me, right? You said, this has worked for so long, but you then took it off the market and took it back private again. What was the thought process there? And does that mean you think that there's no role for the stock exchange for small businesses anymore? Or is it more nuanced than that?
Yeah, I think it's more nuanced than that. I think for me, it was the right time to do it. And the reason was, in 2014, when we took the business private, we had about 2 times debt, two times EBITDA. That's about the most you could really put into a public company without sort of getting really penalised for it. And we wanted to do these acquisitions, and we could see the market consolidating, and we wanted to be the consolidator. And what I realised was I could actually take the business private by borrowing more money. And we borrowed 6 times debt.
Yeah.
So I kind of bought the business back using debt and a private equity.
So let's just slow down for the audience there for a second, because this is a really key point. It's a bit horses for courses, right? The stock exchange is really good at some things. It's not as good as others. So if you run a very fast, organically growing business, Revolut, let's say, something like that, right, then it's an absolutely fantastic way of raising money and spreading the shareholder base. If you want to do something that involves borrowing a lot of money, it is quite risk averse.
Yes.
Right. And the bit that sort of Matt and I struggled with over the years was this new concept called private equity was turning up, and they were borrowing 6 times profits. And we were sat there, and we could only borrow 2, 3 at a push.
Yes.
So if you want to go in that route, you kind of had to do that, didn't you?
Yes. Yeah, if we wanted to continue to be a consolidator rather than the consolidated, we had to get access to this capital. And the only way to do it is not on the market. Now, that's not to say the market wasn't good for me. It absolutely was. We had a great experience. I'd always recommend to people, if it's the
must
right
have brought
time,
you
it's
a
the
lot
right
of
thing.
governance rules and how to behave and grow up as a business.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And grow up and be a bit more corporate, which I think we needed to do, because it helped us then when you bring private equity backers in, because they're just the same. They've got similar methodology in terms of the corporate responsibilities, the way that they govern, the way that they look at the financial numbers, probably even more so at times, and certainly on a more regular basis than you do with the city.
I've often heard people say to me, and I don't know whether I believe this, it takes ages to run a public company. It'll be much easier when you go private.
Yeah, that's not my experience.
No, that's what I'm thinking.
Yeah, and I certainly would say, people say that to the CFO regularly. So my CFO was told, it's going to be so much easier. He'd say, hands down, it isn't.
Why is that?
Just because of the amount of financial reporting and the regularity. So from a city perspective, because we were on AIM, we only reported twice a year. Private equities every month. And if you're lucky, every month. They actually want to know, pretty much every couple of weeks how things are going. I'd have a regular impact. I'd speak to my PE guys every week, easily. We just didn't do that as a public market.
And scrolling forward again, so you take the business private. At that stage, as you said, it's making over £100 million.
Yes.
Which is a huge milestone. I mean, there aren't that many businesses in the UK making over £100 million, full stop.
Yep.
And you make a fundamental decision to split the business into 3 chunks, which is wholesale, small business, and large business. Right? The result of that decision was all of the deals that you've done in the last 5 years. Was that something that sort of was just an instinctive decision? Did it take a long time to draw that conclusion? And I guess also you backed people, good people within the individual businesses to run them for you, because it reached a scale where obviously you can't make every day-to-day decision in the business, right?
Yeah. I think ultimately what we decided, and I'd love to say it was me, Chris, but I'm a big believer in luck. I think luck's a massive part of anyone's success. It has been on mine on numerous occasions. I just took something that someone else had actually thought about, replayed back to me, and thought, that's a good idea. Regurgitated it a few times, and then thought, actually, the sum of the parts is worth more than the whole. So if the group is worth this, actually, if you break it down into 3 separate parts, it's worth a lot more. Why would I let somebody else do that? Why don't I do it myself? And that's ultimately what I did. I just then broke the business down, and then also tried to simplify the business. Rather than having group functions, actually have, in the wholesale business that's now become GIACOM, just give them full autonomy, full P&L responsibility for everything. You have your own marketing, your own HR, your own everything, and every pound is yours to spend.
You're making that sound easy, but one of the real, almost emotional changes is, you've been the chief exec, you've run this incredibly fast-growing thing, and then you've got to realise that, no, I'm going to appoint 3 chief execs and I'm going to stand back.
Yep.
How did you find that bit of handing over the reins to somebody else?
Difficult. I think I'm probably, and if you spoke to the chief execs, they'd probably say even more difficult from their perspective, because I am fairly hands-on as well. I'm not great at just taking a complete sit back. I understand the industry. I'm quite intuitive. I like to get a feel for exactly what's going on in the business. But what I did do, and I was really disciplined on, is give them full autonomy in that business, to the point where, for instance, our wholesale business was called Daisy Wholesale Services. The CEO came to see me and said it's one of the toughest conversations he thought he was ever going to have, when he said, I want to change the name of the business. And I said, do it. If that's what you want to do, if you think it's the right thing to do, I'm backing you, so do it. And I think he would say that's probably when he started to then really grow into the role and start to think, wow, I am actually in control of this business completely, and I can take it to that next level. And he certainly did that.
I've certainly found that as a huge challenge when you become a chairman, is be very careful about overruling your chief exec.
Absolutely.
You can offer advice, you can steer them, but at the end of the day, you've got to give them the head, and either they succeed or you say, you're the wrong one, this is not working.
Yes.
It's quite tough, though, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. It's really tough. And because this has been my baby, Daisy, I've grown it since 2001. We're nearly 25 years old. Out of the first 10 employees, we've still got 7 of them. We are like a little bit of a family. So when we've separated things off, to give people that autonomy is difficult. But what I'd say is I've always thought it's for the greater good of what's to come. So I didn't want myself to get in the way of the success that we could achieve by thinking that I always know the best, because I absolutely don't. And what I wanted to do is put the CEOs in a position where they know more than me at all times about their particular business. I've got this saying, you've got to be at the coalface, and I'm not at the coalface in regards as they are in SME or in large enterprise or in wholesale. I've got an overview, but I can't be all over it like they can. So you've got to give them the trust, and not just them, their people the trust that they know better than I do what's happening in the market.
But it was fundamentally the right decision, because just from a purely sort of corporate finance perspective, right? Focus businesses that do one thing are a lot easier to sell than conglomerates that do lots of things.
Explain.
Yes.
Because they're much easier to explain. And of course, people who come and look at them, they like that bit, but they don't like that bit.
Yes.
So the result of that decision that you made, which was one decision, was to create a group with 3 businesses.
Yes.
But actually, the next 5 years was separate deals with each of the 3 businesses.
Yes.
And that was your aim, really, wasn't it, from the outset, I think?
Yeah, because I realised pretty quickly that there are different buyers for different parts of the business. It was a lot harder to find one buyer for it all, but also to partner with it, because there was different acquisitions that we wanted to do in different segments of the market, and it was far easier to get a partner that understood that market back to front, like SME, for instance, or corporate. Rather than having a broader range view of the market.
Let's just do what next. I mean, for those who've never heard of Daisy, the fact that O2 decided to call itself O2 Daisy in the business market gives you the scale of how well-known Daisy is in the business market. When you've done a deal that big, do you just stop and walk off into the sunset now, or I don't think the answer is
no.
No.
Yeah, I'm already trying to work out how we can get to the next stage. I mean, if you look at the UK market, there's over 5 million small and medium-sized businesses. We've probably got about 750,000.
Yeah, be fair, 2.5 million of them are one-man bands.
They are, but they're still businesses, aren't they?
Yeah,
they're still getting up every day and going out and, and I think that's the driving force of the UK economy. When politicians talk about growth, they should think about who it is that they're talking about that need to grow, and how can we help them grow.
I sat on the Cabinet Office SME panel for 8 years, and I used to start by saying, just think if all of them hired one more person.
Simple as that. Simple, not even one, half. Can you bring someone in just temporary or something like that? The drive, the efficiencies that you can then get.
But where do you go now? So do you think there's still room to grow in the UK, or are you looking abroad?
Yeah, I think, again, if I'm talking about, there's 2 different businesses. Our GIACOM business.
So it's 2 different answers.
Yeah, and there's slightly 2 different answers. In the UK, it's all about consolidating down. So O2 Daisy is all about, can we consolidate further? Can we cross-sell multiple products into that existing customer base that we've got? From a GIACOM perspective, it's a platform business. It's ready to go international. We've kind of just got to find the right deal and the right partners to make that happen in the future.
I mean, that's another lesson for other industries. This is one of the challenges we've always had in technology. Yes, it's great to get new customers, but can you work out how to sell them more things as well?
Yes. Yeah. Everyone talks about cross-sale. It's easy to talk about. It's a lot harder to deliver.
Great presentation, but it's actually hard to do, isn't it?
Yeah, no, I agree. Yeah, no, absolutely. But I think, again, that comes down to focus. What you need to do is be completely obsessed with the particular area that you're focusing on, and look at it from a customer lens. So why did I set up Daisy originally? I set up Daisy originally because I used to sell telephone systems to customers that had a nightmare getting the connectivity. Now that's grown since then, because we do mobile and we do, cybersecurity, and we do all these other different products and services. But if you go back to fundamentally, what does a small business want? They need someone to help them. They don't necessarily have a lot of IT skills. And what we do, or what we try to do in our businesses, is try and help them.
That's an
make
interesting
it
point,
simple.
isn't it? Sort of, I've been in this for 40 years, and technology changes, but what doesn't change is the fact that there's 2.5 million small and medium-sized businesses who need advice on IT.
Yes.
That's never going to change.
No.
This has just flown by. What's the biggest mistake you made?
God, I made quite a few mistakes. I think probably hiring mistakes, knowing when you've hired someone that they're wrong and carrying on for another 12 months.
And not fixing it quick enough.
Not fixing it quick enough. Knowing absolutely in your gut feel that this person isn't right, or we're not right for this person, because it can be the other way around as well. A lot of the time it can be the company that's not right, because I'm quite difficult to work for, as you can imagine. I'm pretty restless.
No idea what you mean.
So, if you're not used to working in an environment where you've got an entrepreneur that's got a million ideas and never really switches off, if you're not used to that, that's quite shocking. So that's why I say that. It's not always about the individual. It's sometimes about the match just isn't right.
Okay, so it's getting the wrong people is a mistake. What other things do you think?
I think I should have probably gone harder sooner. I didn't get
Even
any
harder.
debt. Even harder, yeah. I didn't put any debt in the business or start doing acquisitions till nearly 5 years into the journey. I wish I'd started a little bit sooner, because I think I could have got a little bit more scale. And I think I probably waited a little bit long on the public markets. I should have gone the year before. I think I could have got even bigger and scaled a bit faster. So, but yeah.
And what advice would you give to people? There are people out there who've got a decent sized business.
Yep.
Their aspiration is to get it to 100 million of sales and 10 million of profit, for example.
Yeah.
You went and, you've created £2 billion businesses, £500 million business. What advice would you give to people who are watching this and thinking, maybe I could do that?
Yeah, go for it. I think what you've got to though ask yourself is, do you really want it? Because it's hard. It's not an easy, it's not an easy decision to make.
It's risky as well, right?
It can be really risky. It's going to take an enormous amount of your personal life. And do you really enjoy what you do? Because I do this because I enjoy it. This is my hobby. I enjoy working. I enjoy business. I enjoy meeting other businesses. Don't do it just because you want to make money, because I don't think you'll be as successful as you think you will be. You've got to kind of do something you love. So if you're going to do it, I don't know what it is. If you're into fashion, do it in fashion. Don't try and be an IT services business because you think you can make a load of money, because you won't be any good at it.
Because you've got to have a passion.
You've got to have a passion. I
Yeah.
think so anyway. I've always stuck to telecoms. People have said, and I've done other things, but I always come back to it because I do like the industry that I'm in and I understand it.
So one last question then is, you were 16.
Yeah.
Okay. What would you tell a 16-year-old now, particularly somebody who's not expecting to get 11 A stars?
Yeah, I would say don't worry too much about your GCSEs and what you're going to get. Don't work hard, because working hard is really important. What I'd say is don't feel as though you're a failure, because you're not. You're not a failure. Just because you're not good at school, you don't get GCSEs, it doesn't mean you're a failure. It really doesn't. And I don't think we tell young people that enough. The pressure that's on young people to get an exam and come out with a result is just too much. I'd say think about your life skills. And I'd also say work hard. The big thing that I've always done is first in, last out, work really hard, be really honest. If you don't understand something, put your hand up. And you can learn so much quicker when you come out of school, because there's so many different ways to learn.
Fantastic way to end.
Work ethic. Great way to end.
Yeah.
Matthew, lovely to see you.
Great to see you. Thanks, guys.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Whenever I meet somebody like Matt Riley, I can't help but ask the obvious question: what's different about him? Why has he created not one but £2 billion businesses, and the rest of us have just never done it?
Well, look, there are 70 million of us in the UK, right? And you can count the Matt Rileys on the fingers of one hand or two hands, right? So what are the qualities? What is different about him? And the short answer, Ian, is if I could bottle it, I'd sell it, right? So I don't have...
But business is not a recipe, is it?
It's not. And there isn't one answer. But why don't we break down 4 or 5 things about Matt, which are qualities that entrepreneurs... So first one I would go for is he is relentless. Every single day he's doing something. He cannot sit still. He's absolutely relentless.
Resilience. It's the people who never give in, isn't it, that get you there. That's part of it. I think the other bit, when you listen to him more and more, because we've both known him a long time, is he's incredibly positive all the time. I mean, he's beyond a glass half full type character, isn't he?
Yeah, you've got to get up to succeed. You are going to have knocks all the time in life and in business. And the people like Matt who succeed, maybe not as successful as him, every morning they get up, There will always be headwinds. There'll be things going wrong. Maybe you're losing money for a couple of months, and you just go forward.
He comes across as quite humble in the sense of he openly says, if you don't know, go and ask somebody. He asked his friend, the bank manager, how to set up business and things. The people who are frightened of showing that I don't know something, I don't to ask something, have got it all wrong. 'Cause my experience is that particularly older people like helping younger people. Don't be frightened of asking.
Well, I think it's true of a lot of things in life. I think people are intellectual magpies, right? The successful people will see something over there and they'll think, I'll remember that. And what Matt's done throughout his career, I think, is he's seen what good looks like, and he's bottled all of that. He's brought it all in, and he's been able to use it. Fundamentally, you have to be very smart.
Yeah, but also there's a huge amount of people who left school early, started selling, realised they were good at it, then sat back and thought, how do you make money doing this? And thought, well, I'll have a bit of that. So there's a lot of entrepreneurs who are ex-sales guys, and he's probably the best example of them all, really, isn't he?
Well, you can be good at selling in the sense of, selling a product, but you can also be good at selling in the sense of selling yourself, selling an image, selling a business. So being able to sell is a fundamental attribute, and Matt certainly is, incredibly persuasive.
At the end of the day, you need a fantastic team to build a business. It doesn't matter what the sector is, right? And he openly said that one of his problems is sometimes he's held on to people too long. Now, I agree with that bit, but I also like the bit where he said, sometimes it's that they're not right for us, but sometimes it's that we're not right for them. There's a big lesson there that you have to warn people what environment they're coming into. If it is mad, busy, constant go, 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 that doesn't suit somebody who prefers a book in a bookshop. Exaggerated to prove a point, but you see what I mean. And I think he's quite humble in that point.
Well, he's good with people. He's good at choosing. You've got to
Is
know
that
your weaknesses.
Is that the common factor of all great leaders? They're good with people.
It might be, and I'm sort of thinking this conversation is a bit like, what caused the First World War, right? There's 4 or 5 different factors we've had. He's relentless. He's positive. He's good with people. He knows his weaknesses. He doesn't take no for an answer. All of those great qualities. The First World War analogy, right, is does that mean if someone has all those qualities, they will be a Matt Riley or a Richard Branson? That's the key question. So there's one thing that, going back to the beginning of the interview, that he has that a lot of entrepreneurs do have, which is dyslexia, right?
The incredible thing about it, when he discovered he had dyslexia, is I'm good at maths, but I'm rubbish at languages, right? He adopted the same approach. He just said, well, I'm not good at reading, but it's made me stronger at something else, and I've got a fantastic memory, and I'm great at numbers. So he called it his superpower. So he doesn't concentrate on what he's bad at and criticise himself for it. He concentrates on what he's good at and then gets other people to sort things out. That attitude is worth a fortune in business.
Well, Richard Branson is famously dyslexic, very big in dyslexia charities. Charles Dunson, who created the Carphone Warehouse and Talk, he was dyslexic. I had a client, Ian, and interestingly, when we went out to sell his business, he could barely read a word on a page when it was written down. I mean, he had to say one-stop shop, and we had about 15 takes. And he said to me, because I'm not dyslexic, Chris, you've got to realise, if I go into Waterloo Station and I look at the board, the big board, I see, it's like seeing Japanese characters. So that is kind of what I see. So I guess, these entrepreneurs, they see the world differently.
Yeah, and let's just leave it as we're just using dyslexia as an example here. It doesn't matter whatever makes you different to everybody else. It doesn't stop you doing this. It doesn't stop you becoming a billionaire business.
Sadly, we're never going to find the magic formula in.
No.